Donald Trump somehow managed to turn one of the worst days of his presidency into something even more humiliating, embarrassing, and chaotic by delivering what was honestly one of the worst speeches I've ever seen and to one of the smallest crowds he's ever faced. To be blunt, the crowd was practically empty as Trump stood there ranting, raving, and spewing nonsense while the Epstein scandal continues to consume his presidency. The speech exposed just how panicked and unraveling he truly is. We're going to break down this disaster, where Trump couldn't form coherent thoughts and completely fell apart. But before we do, please take a moment to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and enjoy the work we do, hit that subscribe button. It really helps support the channel. Now, let's get into Trump's speech and how this train wreck began. Starting with his familiar routine of lying about the so-called mess he claims to have inherited.
They're the ones that caused the highest inflation in the history of our country, which led to the highest prices in the history of our country. I inherited the mess. I got the prices down, and they're going down still further. Look at gasoline. A lot of areas now in our country, $1.99 a gallon.
There were magazine covers calling Joe Biden's economy the envy of the world, pointing to the post-COVID recovery. And yes, every country dealing with post-COVID recovery faced inflation, higher prices, instability, and people struggling more than before. No one ever claimed Biden's economy was perfect, or that houses were being handed out on every corner, or that young people suddenly had easy access to high-paying dream jobs. That was never the argument. But compared to the rest of the world, the U.S. economy under Joe Biden was performing remarkably well. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has taken that situation and made it dramatically worse. He didn't just weaken the economy. He wrecked it in ways few could have imagined. And he did it using the same tactic he always relies on: strong arm pressure and extortion, aimed at world leaders abroad and CEOs at home. That exact behavior is what he was bizarrely bragging about in this disastrous speech.
And that's despite taking in billions and billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. Remember, they said, oh, the tariffs will cause inflation. Just came out with the best inflation report we've had in years. And lots of cash, too. In fact, 1776, right? $1,776 goes to our military. You know, it was 1,775. And that was the number, you know, that was just a lump. I said, you know, if we had $1, we got 1776. Somebody said, that's genius. I said, well, I'm smart.
It's honestly wild that a clear majority of Americans, Republicans, and Democrats alike now recognize that Donald Trump's tariffs are hurting the country exactly in the ways experts warned they would. And yet, somehow, so many people still couldn't see this coming going into the 2024 election. Trump continues to talk about these tariffs as if they're some kind of miracle solution, as if they rescued us from the so-called terrifying Biden economy. But the reality is the opposite. These tariffs are actively damaging the economy, killing jobs in the very industries Trump claimed he would revive. Manufacturing has taken a major hit. Factories are shutting down across the country, and entire communities are paying the price. And as bad as the job losses are, what may be even worse is what's coming next: massive healthcare losses, something Trump is still screaming about while absurdly blaming Barack Obama for the fallout of his own policies.
The current Unaffordable Care Act, commonly known as Barack Hussein Obamacare, was created to make insurance companies rich. It was bad health care at much too high a cost, and you see now that the steep increase in premiums that's being demanded by the Democrats. It was never any good, Obamacare. It was done for the benefit of insurance companies, which totally control the Democrats. That's why you could have a strike, on January 30th. You could have another shutdown because the Democrats are totally in the hands of, they're totally controlled by the insurance companies, big wealthy companies. Again, I want the money to go directly to the people so you can buy your own health care, and you'll get much better health care at a much lower price. And the only losers will be the insurance companies that have gotten rich.
Does Donald Trump really think that mocking people's names or leaning into racist language will somehow change the outcome? That people won't lose their health care or despise him for it? Does he understand that no matter how much venom he spits, no matter how wide he turns on the bigotry tap, people are still going to hate him? That will never change. People have finally woken up. Something clicked. It all snapped into place. Oh, right. This is Donald Trump. This is why we can't stand him. That's why at the beginning of the year, I never bought into the idea that Democrats should work across the aisle with him. If you were watching this show back then, you know I rejected that nonsense outright. The idea that maybe Trump had some good ideas, whether it was about the border or legislation like the Laken-Riley Act, was always a fantasy. These people are criminals. They wanted to massively expand ICE, giving it more funding than nearly every military in the world except ours and China's, all so they could harass black and brown communities. Of course we shouldn't work with them. And of course, Donald Trump was always going to collapse. That's exactly what we're witnessing now, with Epstein, with his cognitive decline, and with his physical health. It all came to a head when he literally couldn't speak. Just listen to how silent the crowd was in those moments.
It will also tremendously it's going to reduce the cost of health care because they are totally beholden. I don't love that word, but they're beholden. They're beholden to the insurance companies.
So in that first clip, I can't be the only one who thought he was about to say the R word again, right? It really felt like he was heading there. Okay, fair enough, but then he got stuck on the word beholden. Has anyone ever thought that beholden is a confusing word? Like being beholden to a person, an idea, or some kind of influence? No? Nobody? Right, because the problem isn't the word. The problem is Donald Trump, who clearly has a very shaky grasp of the English language. And the crowd's reaction said everything. The silence was loud, especially because it was such a tiny crowd to begin with. I was already laughing before the clip even played, just looking at how small it was. That awkward silence only made it more painful to watch.
And there'll be a lot of money left over. Right? But they'll not be.
Look at that crowd. Tiny. Almost laughably small. Just a handful of people, maybe 400 at most, gathered so Trump could shout at them. It's honestly embarrassing. If that doesn't perfectly sum up the Trump presidency, I don't know what does. We get the usual routine. Mispronounced words, losing his train of thought, struggling to speak, yelling about Barack Hussein Obama, claiming he inherited a disaster, insisting everything is terrible except him, and declaring his love for tariffs, all delivered to a crowd barely larger than a high school assembly. That's not strength, that's sad. I genuinely think I could pull a bigger crowd on short notice. This is humiliating. And yet even this mess doesn't compare to what's really unraveling his presidency right now. Trump is panicking. The bungled handling of the Epstein files and the apparent criminal cover-up are eating away at his term. Republicans themselves are now openly calling for Pam Bondi to resign. We're seeing it across the party. There's nothing Trump can do to stop it. Still, he's clinging to the fantasy that people hate Democrats more than they hate him. That's just not true. He tried to spin that narrative here, but it's not landing anymore.
And we did a hell of a job. Did a hell of a job. You'd still be sitting in the mud if I didn't get elected. You would be. People were sitting in the mud. But I helped rebuild your state, and I didn't get any help from the Democrats, not your governor, not your man that's running, by the way, for Senate against Michael Whatley, who's phenomenal. Michael Whatley is incredible. Your previous governor was a disaster. He's also a radical left person, by the way. He's radical left. You don't want him. He doesn't represent you. You just...
If Democrats being in charge is what he calls hell, then honestly, sign me up. Because if that's hell, it sounds a lot better than what we're dealing with now. What Donald Trump describes isn't fire and brimstone. It's more like that show, The Good Place, when you realize you're actually in the bad place. It's not obvious destruction at first. It's subtle, exhausting, psychological chaos. That's exactly what Trump's presidency feels like. And let's be clear, plenty has gone up in flames under Donald Trump. Air traffic control failures, government dysfunction, basic services falling apart. Those weren't accidents. They were the result of terrible decisions. So no, this fantasy he's spinning about Democrats ruining everything just doesn't match reality. The truth is simple. The Epstein scandal has effectively ended Donald Trump's presidency. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene has said it. He's a lame duck, and because of that, he's unraveling. You can see it in his behavior, his speeches, his panic, and it's only going to get worse as Democrats keep applying pressure and refusing to let this issue die, just like Congressman Robert Garcia did right here.
Well, first, I think we should be very clear. This is absolutely breaking the law. I mean, they have not produced actually what they were required to do, which was all the files by today in a way that was searchable for the public, and that is not what's the case. What we have essentially is, one, we have a group of documents that have already been released to the public. And so there's, it could be even more than half of the documents we're reviewing right now have already been released. This includes court documents. It includes public video that's already been released to the public. It includes other civil case documents that are in there, the prison footage from Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell's testimony, and all of that information, including about 33,000 pages that were initially released to the Oversight Committee, are all in the public record. That already does not count for new information. Then we have what appears to be new, including some photos and other documents. Those are highly redacted, and we don't really have any explanation as to why they've been redacted or what is actually there in those documents. And so we have right now, what we're seeing is not transparency. This is not what the law passed. This does not meet the subpoena that the Oversight Committee has in place. What it is defying the Congress and, quite frankly, defying what the president signed into law in releasing all of these files. And so the review will continue. They're now saying they're going to try to get these documents over the next few weeks. In our initial estimation, and again, this is our estimation right now, it could be that we're only getting about 10% of what the DOJ likely has. And of that 10%, 5% of that has already been released, and the other 5% is highly redacted. So we're getting very little so far. We hope to get more in the days ahead. But this is Pam Bondi. Donald Trump should release all the files today and immediately.
We are not backing down. And neither are Robert Garcia, Ro Khanna, or Adam Schiff. There are so many strong Democrats who have been leading the fight on Epstein and holding this administration accountable. Jasmine Crockett continues to take Donald Trump head on every single day. These are leaders who refuse to stay silent and refuse to let this go. And that's exactly who we're going to keep highlighting on this show every day. I almost forgot to mention Jamie Raskin, truly a friend of the show and a key voice in this fight. These are the Democrats we're going to elevate and support. If you want to support that work, as always, hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you made it to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I will see you soon.